On this Sunday night, new COVID-19 cases in Canada connected to a cruise ship, tracing the moves of travelers exposed to the new coronavirus.
Anyone they've been in contact with is going to be personally contacted.
Plus the demands on the Canadian government to buffer the impact on the economy.
We do need to be prepared, and we are preparing. Italy's lockdown.
Mass hysteria at this point.
A Canadian woman describes the chaos in one of the worst outbreak zones. Plus, Bernie Sanders' uncertain path to the Democratic nomination. And the Canadian Catholic putting his faith in TikTok.
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin with breaking news. The Canadian government has a plane ready to bring home the 237 Canadians trapped on the Grand Princess. That's the cruise ship off the coast of California. The request was made by the U.S. government. Those passengers will be screened before boarding the plane and then be taken to the Canadian Forces Base in Trenton, Ontario, where they'll undergo 14 days of isolation. Global News broke the latest developments to one of the Canadian passengers on that cruise ship.
It feels bloody wonderful is how it feels. I would rather be on Canadian soil under Canadian medical care, if that's necessary, than here in the United States. So I am exhilarated by that news.
Here at home, the number of new cases keeps climbing by the day. Today, there are at least 59 confirmed cases across the country. Alberta has its first confirmed case, as well as 3 presumptive cases. All of them are connected to travel. Health officials in the province are tracking their movements and the people they may have been in close contact with since becoming exposed to the new coronavirus.
This marks 4 cases in 4 days. For many, this may be alarming. I want to underline that 3 of these 4 cases are linked to a single cruise ship.
To be clear, those cases are linked to a previous voyage on the Grand Princess. But on this trip, 21 people on the ship have the new coronavirus. As Jennifer Johnson reports, the U.S. is racing to limit the spread across the country. But health officials aren't seeing eye to eye with the White House on how to handle the outbreak.
The U.S. is now seeing an acceleration of COVID-19 cases as the disease spreads east, over 30 states reporting, even the District of Columbia. Its first patient, a church rector. While the White House continues to say it has the crisis under control, the nation's top infectious disease doctor is telling a different story.
We certainly, now that we have tests out and get a better handle, but clearly I'm concerned about community spread. You have to realistically be concerned about community spread.
Dr. Fauci is encouraging vulnerable people to avoid large gatherings and avoid flying if they can. The Trump administration is denying reports it overruled health officials who wanted air travel restricted for the sick and elderly, calling the report complete fiction. It's also downplaying concerns after a person attending the CPAC conference with President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence last weekend in Maryland tested positive for COVID-19.
That's why we ask people to sanitize their hands and to take various types of precautions. So the president does that.
Now some good news for over 3,500 people, including 237 Canadians, stranded on board the Grand Princess off the coast of California. The ship will be allowed to dock at the port of Oakland likely on Monday. At least 21 people are infected and will be hospitalized. The others will be taken to federal isolation sites to be tested and quarantined for 14 days.
Looking at a scenario with, 33,000 plus people, protecting the people on land, protecting us.
New York's governor also looking to protect his citizens. A state of emergency has been declared, affecting America's busiest tourist city.
We are trying to contain the spread of the virus. How do you contain the spread of the virus? By testing as many people as you can, find the positives, and then isolate the positive people.
Government officials now say they are producing more test kits, which so far couldn't keep up with demand. The U.S. Surgeon General says it's working with private industries and predicts there will be about 4 million test kits available by the end of the week. Robin?
Jennifer Johnson in Washington. The worldwide economy is taking massive hits from this disease. The International Air Transport Association predicts global airlines alone could lose up to $113 billion in sales. Here at home, there could also be major economic impacts. Mike Couteur now on what the federal government can do ahead of this spring's budget.
Good afternoon, Columbus Travel.
It's not something you hear very often these days at Angela Maynardi's travel agency. The phone hasn't been ringing as fears of COVID-19 and the actual virus spread.
This will be the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, this year, if this continues on, inevitably there are people who can't survive through this.
Global tourism will take a hit if COVID-19 can't be contained. It's bad news for Canada's tourism industry, which is worth about $102 billion, according to the Tourism Industry Association of Canada. A chunk of that loss will be in cruise ships. The Port of Vancouver is a hub. But Saturday, BC's health minister issued a strong warning against traveling on cruise ships. And cruise companies are being forced to adjust.
We have a Book with Confidence program, so if you do book today and you're unsure for whatever reason, you can make an adjustment because things are changing day to day. So
other sectors may not be as flexible, and those are top of mind for the finance minister as he continues to craft a federal budget which may include financial help for those affected by COVID-19.
You know, we have a strong fiscal position, so we're prepared in terms of the actual health risks, but we have a strong position fiscally so that we can actually take measures as needed as the facts come out.
But the Conservatives disagree, saying by running up large deficits in their first mandate, the Liberal government is not prepared to deal with the new coronavirus or the rail blockades.
They eliminated the cushion long ago, and they've put us in a place of weakness and vulnerability as we face these two crises.
Morneau contends Canada is in a good position, pointing to the more than 30,000 jobs that were added to the economy in February. But in an interview on the West Block with Mercedes Stephenson, this senior economist at TD Bank says the finance minister is taking a narrow view of things.
We take a broader picture. We had a very soft end to last year. Business investment, just really failing to deliver for several years now. And then you have other interruptions, rail blockades, weather, things like that. We're talking about, really not a lot of growth buffer as we move into the year.
Expect that to be a central theme when provincial and territorial leaders meet with the federal government at the end of next week in Ottawa. It's an opportunity for all levels of government to discuss the response to COVID-19 so far and the next steps as the outbreak widens. Robin?
Mike Couteur in Ottawa. Italy's government has imposed strict quarantine measures on a quarter of the population to slow the spread of COVID-19. Tonight, 14 provinces have been isolated, mainly in Italy's north. The whole of Lombardy, its financial capital Milan, and tourist hubs like Modena and Venice all have travel bans. The 16 million people stuck there can't get out, and no one can come in. 366 people have died in Italy. Infections are spiking, and the lockdown is sparking widespread panic. Thousands tried to flee south to escape being isolated. Mike Drolet spoke to a Canadian woman living in Italy about the confusion and the chaos.
On any given day, this Venice piazza would be packed, the cafes bustling and Grand Canal overflowing with tourists. Instead, it stood as a stark example of how hard COVID-19 has hit Italy.
Ma io vi vedo, vi sono vicino.
Sunday morning, for the first time ever, Pope Francis delivered his Sunday prayer via video link. He admitted to feeling caged as he looked out the window to a crowd of a sparse few hundred where normally thousands congregate.
I think the coronavirus is an exaggeration, so I think they're overdoing it, so it should come out like it does every Sunday.
Frustration abounds, but Italy has seen more COVID-19 cases than any other country in Europe. Its strain has now been traced to a car parts manufacturer in Germany. And after weeks of trying to contain the virus, Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has announced unprecedented new restrictions affecting the areas around Milan and Venice.
Stiamo affrontando un'emergenza nazionale.
We are facing a national emergency, he said, before outlining how 16 million people, roughly a quarter of the population, would be quarantined for at least a month. Alitalia has since announced it has suspended all flights to and from Milan and Venice. Schools, gyms, museums, and clubs are also closed, and anybody wanting to leave will have to get special permission. Italians have also been told to stay 1 meter away from others and to refrain from shaking hands or greeting others with the customary kiss on the cheek. The news leaked out before the official announcement, creating an overnight furor that saw many Italians try to get out before the roads were closed.
But the people down south are saying, please don't come down south because you're going to be infecting us. So there's a lot of confusion and mass hysteria at this point.
Canadian expat Margot Bellani says the rules are unclear, or at least they're not being followed everywhere. That it's gone this far speaks to Italy's desperation to contain the virus, but it remains to be seen if such dramatic measures can be enforced. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
The outbreak is having an impact on major sporting events. Italy's top soccer league, the Serie A, will hold an emergency summit on Tuesday to determine whether or not to suspend all matches no fans have been attending. And this month's Formula One Grand Prix in Bahrain will happen behind closed doors without spectators trackside due to the outbreak. And in Japan, there were no fans at the country's famed springtime sumo tournament, where wrestlers wore face masks. And there are 5 months to go before the Tokyo Olympics. In China, at least 10 people have died after a hotel used as a quarantine center suddenly collapsed. 71 people were initially trapped. 23 people are still missing. The hotel was being used to isolate and monitor people arriving from regions where the new coronavirus is running rampant. As COVID-19's global spread continues to grow at a rapid pace, so do the myths and misinformation. And that poses a risk to the education that health officials are trying to get out. Our Jeff Semple set out to separate fact from fiction.
It's fast become a must-have accessory. These surgical masks donning faces around the world, from the Chinese president to puppies. Stores across the country have sold out, even though experts say that when it comes to COVID-19, they won't make a difference.
Putting a mask on someone who's sick makes perfect sense. Walking around the city wearing a mask intermittently, there's no evidence to say that that's going to help you.
Certain models, like those used by health professionals, are more effective, but are difficult to use and in short supply. The U.S. Surgeon General tweeted, "Seriously, people, stop buying masks. If healthcare providers can't get them, it puts our communities at risk."
Health officials say your best bet is to wash your hands with soap and water, or use sanitizer with at least 60% alcohol. But the mad dash for these masks is just one example of COVID confusion. And some of the most pervasive myths are actually downplaying the threat.
One popular refrain is that the novel coronavirus is no more dangerous than the seasonal flu.
35,000 people on average die each year from the flu. Did anyone know that? 35,000. That's a lot of people.
The flu is a killer, but so far, COVID-19 appears to be deadlier. Typically, the winter flu kills about 1 in every 1,000 people it infects. But that number for the novel coronavirus appears to be closer to 1 in 100.
The scary thing about novel coronavirus is it seems like it's more contagious than SARS and it's more deadly than seasonal flu.
This statistician notes the virus's reproduction number is 2.28, meaning each sick person is infecting at least 2 others.
That's enough to say it's quick exponential growth. But if we all start being more careful and washing our hands and so on, it's possible that we could reduce that.
It turns out dogs can get the virus. Officials just confirmed a case in Hong Kong, but they don't think canines are contagious. Children can become infected too, but like the majority of all cases, their symptoms are mild, meaning many are likely going undiagnosed.
Without extensive testing, we don't have a clear picture of how far the spread has gone, and all we really can know for sure is that it is a much larger number than the official cases.
Our best weapon against the virus is the production of a vaccine, but that's likely to take at least 1 year. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
We know you have lots of questions about this virus, so send an email to yourquestions@globalnews.ca, and our Jeff Semple will consult experts to find the answers. We also have a special page dedicated entirely to the new coronavirus. That's at globalnews.ca/coronavirus. Coming up on Global National, whatever happened to the Sanders political revolution? In the race to become Donald Trump's rival this November election, Bernie Sanders looked like the man to beat just a few weeks ago. He surged in initial primaries while spearheading a revolution to change the U.S. Democratic Party. But then Joe Biden made a comeback on Super Tuesday, and the Sanders movement has now lost its momentum. Here's Jackson Proskow.
Once a proud thorn in the side of the party establishment, Bernie Sanders, a self-described democratic socialist, is making a last-ditch play to the mainstream.
Bernie is somebody who has the virtue of saying exactly what he believes.
His latest ad is carefully edited to suggest he has the support of former President Barack Obama.
That's right, feel the burn.
The ad was released after Sanders' disappointing performance on Super Tuesday and the departure of other Democratic candidates who endorsed Obama's former Vice President, Joe Biden.
Where we've seen a surge is, quite frankly, from middle-of-the-road, moderate, middle-aged suburban voters who are more for Biden than they are for Bernie.
After his strong showing in Iowa and New Hampshire, Sanders is suddenly left with an uncertain path to the Democratic nomination. Despite years of remarkably consistent messaging and positions,
we are not only taking on the corporate establishment, we're taking on the political establishment.
He hasn't grown his base since his unsuccessful 2016 campaign. In fact, support has slipped among some key demographics, even as he outpaces Biden in fundraising.
But I am be honest with you, we have not done as well in bringing young people to the political process. It is not easy.
In a year where Democrats are singularly focused on defeating Donald Trump, Sanders faces the reality that voters may be more interested in playing it safe than political revolution. If he's not the eventual nominee, his support and the support of his followers will still be critical for the party.
I think Trump's ability to have the left divided is how he wins again with 47% of the electorate.
Sanders seems to sense how fragile his grip on the nomination has become. In recent days, he has canceled campaign events in states like Mississippi, preferring to retreat to the relative safety of states like Michigan, where he hopes to shore up his base with working-class voters. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
Still ahead, how a Canadian church leader is trying to get the flock onto TikTok. Some of the world's oldest institutions are turning to new platforms to attract members. Take the new kid on the block, TikTok. It's one of the fastest growing social media platforms in the world. The app lets users create and share short videos, and it recently surpassed 1.5 billion downloads. Now, as Brianna Karsten-Smith reports, Catholic leaders in Edmonton are putting their faith in this technology as a call to prayer.
From adorable animals
why food great when I gotta lose weight
to recipes, fashion advice, and choreographed dances, TikTok truly offers something for every user.
Maybe 1/3 of your audience will be locally based, and then the 2/3 will be like elsewhere in the world.
It's why a growing number of organizations, including Global News, are signing up. Now the app can even be found on phones in one of the most unlikely of places. The Catholic Archdiocese of Edmonton is now spreading the oldest message on the newest platform. Social media strategist Lincoln Ho came up with the idea.
Evangelization, in different mediums is not a new thing.
He started with a short promotion for their day of confessions.
Did a full 180.
And while it only has a modest 235 views, they're working.
I've heard a few people come and say, hey, I saw you on that TikTok, and I thought, oh, goodness.
Spreading the good word on social media isn't unheard of. Pope Francis joined Twitter in 2012 and has amassed more than 18.1 million followers.
You never really know who you're going to reach with this, right? And so you might capture somebody's attention and say, hey, that's, I should really go and do confession.
But executing that message isn't easy.
A TikTok actually requires way more planning than other ones that I've done.
Something we discovered. And then we cross and we look up.
Okay, this is complicated.
But a little trial and error is something the Catholic Archdiocese of Edmonton thinks even the Pope can get on board with.
Do you think he'd approve?
I think he'd approve. I think he would, certainly.
Brianna Karsten-Smith, Global News.
Okay, like crisscross applesauce, baby.
Edmonton.
Up next on Global National, celebrating International Women's Day. There are celebrations and demonstrations around the world to mark International Women's Day.
Unidas, jamás serán vencidas.
In Montreal, hundreds turned out for a march of diverse women. They say they are mobilizing against violence, poverty, and discrimination. South of the city, in Mohawk territory, members of the community gathered to celebrate the traditional role of Indigenous women.
As caretakers of the land, life givers, title holders of the land, and we're responsible for our children, our children's children, and those that have yet to be born.
Tensions marred some celebrations. In Kyrgyzstan, women were assaulted by masked men. Then police detained dozens. In Pakistan, demonstrations took place despite organized rallies to counter the march. Some protesters threw stones and shoes at the women's rally. Thousands of women across Spain turned out to march against gender inequality. Demonstrators paraded down Madrid streets to the beat of tribal drums decked out in purple, the international symbol for women. And that is Global National for this Sunday. I'm Robin Gill. We leave you tonight with more images from International Women's Day from around the world. Thank you for watching, and good night.